Hello, everybody. Welcome to Tenant Talk Live. Feel free to continue dropping your name in the chat and where you're joining us from, but I'll go ahead and get us started. This month's Tenant Talk Live, we're going to be focusing on navigating just the current housing policy advocacy space during leadership transitions. Coincidentally, we have one of our own at the coalition as well as federally, so we'll get to talk about both a little bit. And for folks who are new, my name is Sid Betancourt, and I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a project manager for inclusive community engagement at the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And again, if you're new and this is your first time joining Tenant Talk Live, this is a space where we provide across the country.
What's up?
Oh, thank you. Where we provide folks to connect with one another and with NLIHC, share best practices, and learn how to be more involved in influencing federal housing policies. And in case you haven't noticed yet, we are recording this meeting and it will be uploaded to YouTube afterwards. So just something to be aware of. And before we get started today, we do have a few awesome guests joining us, but I do want to share our community agreements, which we do at the beginning of every Tenant Talk Live call as a reminder. And these are the 2024 community agreements, so they'll change again when we meet next year. But the first one is the platinum rule, which is treat others the way they want to be treated. So in other words, please consider how the way you want to be treated might differ from how someone else might want to be treated. And one big one that I try to enforce myself sometimes is just muting your mic except when speaking, just to make sure that everybody has a chance to speak. Listen with an open mind and empathy, taking up space, but also making sure that you give space to others. And then just a reminder again that this meeting is being recorded. And with the muting your mic, we'll try to make sure that we give you all the autonomy to do that. But if we're not able to reach you, we'll mute it ourselves. So just a heads up, don't be alarmed if that ends up happening. But yeah, and then this is also a reminder that if you're signed up for NLIHC, you should be receiving this Friday titled The Connection. And the e-blast will contain all the recap materials from this call. So the recording, the chat, any links that were shared in the chat. So you can sign up for NLIHC emails at the link that I'll put in the chat. And you can also view the previous recap for November's Tenant Talk Live in the link that I'll share in the chat. And then lastly, before I hand it over and introduce our guest for today, just a reminder that if you have any questions today that come up throughout the call, feel free to drop them in the chat. I'll save them on the side and I'll bring them back up once we get to Q&A. And also, we just ask that you stay muted if you're not speaking. Repetition is key, and I have to say it just a few times. That way it sticks for folks like myself that need to hear it more than once. But yeah, I'll go ahead and introduce our guests now. I'm really excited. I'll do it in order of the way that they'll be speaking today. So we'll be starting with NLIHC's Brooke Schipporeit, who will be briefly discussing our upcoming housing policy forum and NLIHC membership. We'll also have Kayla Laywell, a policy analyst here, who will be offering some of the insight moving forward into 2025. And we also have the wonderful Renee Willis, who will be leading our conversation and navigating leadership transitions. So I'll begin by passing it over to Brooke, who, as I said, is NLIHC's Director of Field Organizing, or I didn't say that before, but now you all know. And she oversees NLIHC's field outreach, organizing, and advocacy mobilization efforts.
Thanks so much, Sid, and great to see so many names and faces that I recognize and several that are new to me as well. I'll be very brief, but I did want to make sure that you all are aware of a couple of upcoming and ongoing ways to plug into our work. First, some, but not all of you are familiar with our Housing Policy Forum, which is our annual conference in March that happens here in Washington, D.C. It also includes a special pre-forum tenant session reserved for low-income tenants and residents. And registration for the policy forum is now open. And scholarships, we offer a limited number of scholarships for folks with low incomes to join. So wanted to be sure that you all are aware of that opportunity. Our scholarship program will open on Wednesday this week, December 4th. So just a couple of notes. If you plan on attending, regardless of whether you receive a scholarship, you can register or I encourage you to register sooner rather than later, because we do expect to sell out early this year, coming off of a holiday. And then if you will only attend, if you plan to only attend if you receive a scholarship, then you can wait until January to register after we've notified folks, so you'll know whether you got the scholarship or not, because we will set aside enough tickets for people who are receiving a scholarship, so that if we sell out early, that won't affect those folks. So, and just in case you're not familiar with it, our scholarship program includes up to $800 of travel reimbursement, which is new as of this past year's forum, which is really helpful to help get people here to Washington, D.C. And then also includes a shared hotel room with someone of the same gender identity as you. So it's a really fun way to meet people from all over the country and connect with folks. And yeah, we hope you'll join us. And then at the end of that week, we have our Capitol Hill Day, and people who receive a scholarship attend the Tenant session, the full forum, and Capitol Hill Day. And a requirement to receive the scholarship is to be a current NLIHC member, which you can sign up for after receiving the scholarship by a certain date, as well as registering for forum. So more info will be in that email on Wednesday, but just wanted to flag that for you so you know it's coming. And then I'll also be sure to share a link to our registration page so you have that as well. Again, with some more information about the week's events too. And then, as my colleague Kayla will soon share with you, we anticipate a busy year of advocacy ahead. So a couple other ways you can plug into our work outside of forum, our membership. Membership is suggested dues, annual dues. So really any amount that works for you. We offer it for both individuals as well as organizations, and tenant associations, resident associations, those types of groups are considered organizational members. So if you are part of one of those groups or just want to join as an individual, either is great. We hope you can. That's a great way to support our work moving forward and to help us advance our policy goals. So there's the membership link. And then in addition to these wonderful Tenant Talk live calls, we have our house calls, which is a great way to stay plugged into our advocacy work, to hear the latest of what's happening on Capitol Hill and how you can get plugged into that work. So I'll share the link to sign up for that and other working groups. And then last but not least, if you remember nothing else, remember that the field team here, in addition to Sid, Renee, and our policy friends like Kayla, we have a field team here at NLIHC who can serve as a great resource to you, whether it's a question about membership, forum, the house calls, we're here to help. And so here's the map to find who is your field team member. And if you can't access that map for some reason, feel free to reach out to me directly and I'm happy to connect you. So yeah, I don't know, Sid, if you want me to take any questions or just turn it on to the next person.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and turn it to the next person if that's okay. And if
Yeah,
you
of
want to
course.
put your email too in the chat, folks can reach out to you after this call too if they want to touch base one-on-one. But thank you again, Brooke, for sharing all of that really important information. I feel like on these calls, we always get like so busy and caught up, and there's so much other stuff going on in the coalition. So always feel free to use your field team connections to kind of learn more about what's going on if you're curious to. But yeah, I'll pass it over to Kayla now. Kayla Blackwell is a housing policy analyst here at the coalition, and she does a lot of really good work that often involves tenant rights and bills that directly impact tenants. So I'm really excited for her to be on here again. She was here, I think, 2 months ago, if not, yeah, I think 2 months ago now. But yeah, just to talk a little bit more about what 2025 will mean policy-wise.
Thanks, Sid. Do you have my slides or should I pull them up?
I have them. I
Sweet.
can share real quick.
Yeah, I appreciate you introducing me. It is always good for people to say my name first because I just got married and I'm changing my name. I'm Kayla Blackwell. That is me. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a policy analyst here at NLIHC. I'm really glad to be with y'all. So we're talking about the theme of transitions, and I'm really excited to hear from Renee, our interim CEO. But as for our nationwide transition,
Renee on here today.
we're all here with you, Miss Jerry.
Oh, sorry.
If you can move to the next slide, Sid, slide, you know what I mean. So before we talk into the work and the fight ahead, I just want to set us up with where we have been, right? We might be a little scared, a little nervous about all of the threats to affordable housing to come, but this has been done before. We have fought these fights before. When Donald Trump was president from 2016 to 2020, he only, succeeded, and I know that's even kind of a stretch, on one of his major attacks on affordable housing and decent, safe, affordable housing for extremely low-income people. The work for fair housing is 60, 70 years, I'm sure much longer than that, more in the making, but we've still got fight to do for affirmatively furthering fair housing, AFFH. But what we did stop in the first Trump administration was deep cuts to affordable housing investments. We fought back against proposed higher rents and work requirements for HUD residents. We stopped Donald Trump from, the Trump administration from enacting attacks on shelter access for transgender people. We stopped with the National Housing Law Project and our immigration partners nationwide. We stopped a lot of attacks on mixed status immigrant households. And remember, mixed status is if a household has one family member that's a citizen and maybe one that is a DACA recipient, different legal statuses there. And we stopped against a lot of attacks on people experiencing homelessness and a lot of, camps, required camps. Next slide. And so when we talk about the threats to come, a lot of this is similar to what we've fought before. It's scary, but we rallied our nationwide coalition of advocates and tenants and tenant leaders and everyone who has helped us fight that before. We can do it again. And so with Project 2025, it's a lot of the same threats, attacks on immigrants, attacks on people experiencing homelessness, a lot of new work requirements, but we do know that we can do this. So the only new thing really in Project 2025, along with, there's a few multi-sector opportunities for fights here that we'll want to partner with, our partners in the immigration space. One strong threat is, replacing career staff with political appointees. Next slide, please. So I only have a couple slides because I know this can get really wonky really fast, and I want to hear from Renee. But, for next Congress, we do expect the first fight to be on appropriations, as it is every year, though it shouldn't be at this time of year. Appropriations, or the annual budget, is really the first and only thing that Congress really has to do every year. And second to that is the tax bill. The 2017 Trump tax cuts expire at the end of this year. And so the first real opportunity for housing investments and to fight against any attacks on affordable housing is going to be in that tax bill. Additionally, these are some of just the Republican majority's priorities for next Congress. Environmental, detracting from the Inflation Reduction Act, a tax on spending, including affordable housing spending, which I'll get to in my take action in just a second. And then further cuts to affordable care and rural housing in the SNAP and Farm Bill. Next slide, please. And administratively, you know, those were the priorities for the Republican majority Congress we're about to see. But President Trump, or President-elect Trump, as much as we hate to say it, like it's going to be a lot of the similar threats we've seen before, right? So a lot of these proposed deep cuts on affordable housing funding, eliminating housing choice vouchers. We have, you know, several 100,000 people at risk of losing their vouchers. And then, of course, the same for zeroing out construction for public housing, housing trust fund, and eliminating the USICH, which is the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. So again, last Trump administration, these proposals were rejected, but people were harmed. There was a 35-day government shutdown, and of course, we will fight those fights when we get to it. Next slide, please. So I said I wouldn't leave you on a low note. We've fought this before, we can do it again. And the first fight that we're gonna come to, actually we're already in it, is the annual appropriations or the budget that needs to be passed every year. So the most urgent call to action, oh, and I do have the link in the chat. The most urgent call to action is defending against cuts in affordable housing and making your voices known why Congress's funding of HUD's vital affordable housing programs is important to you. NLIHC has this great advocacy hub. I'm glad Brooke talked about all the great work the field team is doing, and this is one of them. We've got all kinds of really great tools here. I wish I could just put the whole website on here, but I just put a little clip there on the left. And this take action link I can paste too if you want to read about all of the other opportunities. We've got a whole resource library there. But this is how you can get involved, prepare yourself, and take action now. You know, a lot of the members of Congress will change in January, but many of them will be the same. And of course, it's always good practice to exercise your voice. So Sid, I don't know if we've got a couple minutes for questions. I'm excited to hear from Renee, but I've put those links in the chat and I'm always happy to talk more. Folks have questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kayla. Somebody did ask if we're able to share these afterwards, and if it's okay, I can include them in the follow-up email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Okay. And again, we'll save the questions to the end if you're able to stay. If not, feel free to drop your email in the chat. But yeah, I'm really excited to hand it over to Renee Willis, who's joining us today. And I know we keep saying interim CEO, president and CEO, but it's not effective until January 3rd, 2025. So I'll just make that distinction right there, because she is currently my supervisor as NLIHC Senior Vice President for Racial Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. But we're really excited to have her transition into this new position. And currently she works to ensure NLIHC's commitment to racial equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to make sure that it's not just living within our culture, but it's also within like our policy priorities, our programming, and our practices. And she's done a lot of amazing work even before that. Prior to stepping into that role, she was also the Vice President for Field and Communications at the Coalition. So I'll let Renee take it away to also share a little bit more about herself and more information.
Thank you, Sid. I so appreciate you and the introduction. And hello, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you this evening. I just love Tenant Talk Live for so many reasons. But one reason is that I remember from day one when it was created, and the need for this type of conversation so that tenants from across the country could connect and could talk and could share best practices. So I'm really excited to see how much it has grown over the years. And so appreciative to some of the folks who have been here from day one. And then I see a lot of new names as well. So I really appreciate everyone being a part of Tenant Talk Live and helping it grow. I sometimes joke with Sydney. I remember back in the beginning days when we were very excited to have 5 people on, five people on. And then when we would put the broadcast out on social media or on YouTube, again, we were very excited to have maybe 10 people to watch the broadcast of it. So things have definitely changed in the number of years. And I'm so grateful to everyone for supporting Tenant Talk Live, to sharing this in your communities and bringing new people on as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about the need to recruit more people in this fight, given all that we've heard from Kayla. But again, it is such a pleasure to be here with you. Sid shared a little bit of my background with you. I've worn many hats here at the coalition. But from day one coming to the coalition, for me, this has just been an incredible organization. I started my career in Baltimore City. I actually live in Maryland, but started in Baltimore City, working for a nonprofit law firm where it is a statewide organization. It's still around, the Public Justice Center. And it's a statewide organization providing legal assistance to tenants who are living in substandard housing conditions or tenants who had, whatever disputes with their landlords. And just remember the pace of especially going into the court with the sheer number of cases, and also the unequal representation of tenants in court as well. So that's where I started my career, and here now with the coalition. But it has been a sheer joy to work with so many incredible and talented people, from people on the ground, our partners, our tenant leaders, our collective leaders, and the staff here at the coalition. So thank you again for allowing me to be a part of today's conversation. And I want to just really start by saying, just identifying the elephant in the room. This is after the elections. This is our first Tenant Talk Live after the elections. And I'm sure that we're all feeling a range of emotions, from anger to exhaustion to frustration, to flat out disbelief, for some to flat out belief, understanding the country in which we live. But it's one of those things where we have to remember that we can't fall into despair. We cannot. And most importantly, we have to think about, like, how can we move together collectively? How do we move together collectively and move forward collectively? And that's a little bit about what I want to talk to you about today. And really just, thinking through, like, what can we do as a coalition, as a movement, to advocate for people with extremely low incomes, and to make sure that we're preserving and building affordable homes that are accessible, and that are affordable and that are in communities of choice, which is incredibly important. But again, we are at a point in this country too, where for many folks, this is a very low point, right? And you can think of it as being the nadir, like a very low point in the history. But we've been here before, as Kayla mentioned. We were here during the first Trump administration. And as Kayla mentioned, we were able to fight off many things during that first administration. But we also recognize now that this incoming administration, that they are ready to do business, that they understand how to move the wheels of government and the levers of government. And that's where we are, right? And we think about it as being, you think about the nadir of being a low point and being here before. But we've also been here even before the first Trump administration. So I want to take you back a little bit in history. And I would be remiss if I didn't do that as working on the ideas team, and which stands for inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and systems thinking. But we've been here before. There was a time in history, right during Reconstruction, where the country had an opportunity to be a new nation, to be a new nation, right? And there were many opportunities during that time. But right after that, we saw Jim Crow, we saw sharecropping, we saw lynchings, the wealth being stolen from Black and Brown people. So we saw all of that right after Reconstruction. But it makes you think about too, like, what did people do during that period of time, right? Many people didn't fall into despair because during that period of time, again, thinking of that as the lowest point, the nadir, and maybe, the zenith being the opposite, the highest point, but during the nadir time, this was a time where people started to build, where communities came together, where people started to organize. This was a time during which this was during the time where the NAACP was created, where fraternities and sororities were created, where the Harlem Renaissance was born during this time. And so many other things as well. But it was during this time where people began to plant seeds for the country and for the community that they wanted to see. And I really do believe that this is the time in which we're in, where this is the time for planting those seeds for the community and for the country that we want to see. And so during this time when people were very hard at organizing and building during the time of, like I said, Jim Crow and sharecropping and really just trying to survive. This was also, like I said, a time where they were planting seeds. And during that time, this was where the children of those who were planting those seeds were watching, right? The generation ahead, they were watching. And these were the children who became the folks who were leading the civil rights, right? And who were fighting a good fight. And so I really do believe, again, that this is the time and is a very low point. But we have an opportunity as a community and as a movement and as a coalition to build the future that we want to see. And so that will involve, continuing to strengthen partnerships, organizing, continuing to organize people in our community, building more, so that we can get to the vision that we want to see. But I will say it won't be easy. There will be so many defensive things that we will have to do in defense, right? And Kayla mentioned some of the things that were tried during the first Trump administration. So we absolutely will have to do the defensive work, absolutely. And we're prepared for that as an organization, as a coalition. As Diane Yantel, our president and CEO, always says, we were built for this, and we truly are built for this. So we will do the defensive work. But as we're doing that, we also have to do, the planting work for the vision and the community that we want to see. And I want to just kind of share too, I just came back from a conference in St. Louis. It was called Facing Race. And one of the gems, the nuggets of information that really just resonated with me, it came from Maurice Mitchell. Maurice is he's a director. He works for the Working Families Party. And Maurice said, if our fight is always against something and never for something, we will lose people. If our fight is always against something and never for something, we will lose people. And it reminds me that we have to, have that vision of the future of the country, of the community that we want to see. And I know we can do that as a coalition, and we're prepared to do that. But I just also too wanted to acknowledge the time that we're in. Yes, it's time to do defensive work, which we're built for, but it's also time to do the planting work. And I'm always going to use a planting analogy as the granddaughter of a sharecropper. So that to me, it really does signal where we are, as a country and what we need to do to build the future we want. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to lead the coalition come January the 3rd, as Sid mentioned. And I'm also grateful to know that we have so many tenant leaders and people like you throughout the country who are ready to fight a good fight and who are willing to fight a good fight. But I know that we can only do this together. So really looking forward to working very closely with you in the months and years ahead. And also too, just going back to Tenant Talk Live, we have these once a month right now. But if we need to provide additional information and timely information to get it out to you, to support the work that you're doing in your communities, if we need to increase the frequency of these, we will do that as well. We've done that before during the height of COVID, and we'll do it again because we want to make sure that you're prepared, that you have all the tools and all the resources that you need and that your neighbors need to fight this fight. So thank you so very much for allowing me to be with you today. And happy to answer any questions that you all may have. And again, thank you for the invitation to join.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Renee. Yeah, you're getting some snaps too. I see Zella, you have your hand up. But folks, remember, if you won't have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I know we have some direct assistance questions too. Unfortunately, I can't answer them directly here, but I am dropping the email in the chat. But for folks who are watching this back in the future, feel free to reach out to us at outreach@nlihc.org for any type of questions regarding direct assistance. And thank you, Zella, for your patience.
No problem. And again, all hail incoming madam in regards to our current climate and environment. Yes, we've been here before. However, we have a much more savvy group that will be doing their due. One area that is of great concern, which will possibly connect with you, it's not so much housing, but it will impact housing, and that is HR 9495, which if the incoming administration gets a hold of, it will penalize nonprofit groups who are not in a line to Project 2025 or any of the incoming administration's guidelines. Putting ourselves into that defense role, plus, as Kayla described, digging, planting, and building, how then can we support you and our organization with this attempt?
Yeah, thank you for that, Zella. Really appreciate that. And you're right. The incoming they're attempting to do whatever they can to stymie criticism of any of their policies and ideology. And it is one of those things where, as an organization that is now, we'll be going into our 51st year as an organization. We've always been outspoken in terms of, with any administration, and we will continue to do so and to be outspoken in that way. It is important to know, and to understand that this piece of legislation is out there, and that it is a concern for any nonprofits, quite honestly, any 501c3 organizations. because it could certainly penalize and take away the tax status, IRS tax status of organizations that are critical of the organization. But I do believe that we have to continue, as we have for the 51 years that we've been in existence, to continue to speak truth to power, to continue to mobilize people in the field, to continue to mobilize tenant leaders across the country, our state partners, all of our partners, during this time, to have a fortified front, because the administration and this particular legislation in particular will be coming at organizations hard and heavy. But I think in terms of, we again have to continue to, it's our mission to continue to fight and be true to our values. And that's what we're going to do, be true to our values.
Thank you so much, Stella. Is there another question? I did see there's like a lot of comments from folks kind of just saying, I think I saw one earlier from Tiffany sharing, just wanting to get to the bottom of systemic and bureaucratic barriers. And also some folks kind of sharing that they, I think this was in relation to that bill, but just like being under the impression that they can declare anyone a terrorist or deny 501 status without proof, etc. Just kind of sharing those worries in the chat. But I don't see any other questions. I don't know. Does anybody else have one? I have a few, so if you don't, that's okay.
If
And
we do,
Hi, yes, I do.
Hi, Brenda.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here. Part of my looks, I haven't been feeling very well. Anyway, I put in my question. It's a little bit long. I was awarded a Section 8 voucher just when the 2 hurricanes hit Northeast Florida, just under Jacksonville, and so I'm displaced now because of that. However, during that time, I received notice that I was awarded a Section 8 choice voucher. I was on a waiting list for a long time. Anyway, so we've been looking, and last week I was diagnosed with a very rare 1% chance brain tumor, and something else that's not good either. And my doctor wants me to right away go to California, and I'm in Florida. Is there any way that there could be an exception, that this is my first time voucher, that they could transfer it to California for my situation? Could they do that?
so I'll respond to that. So I'm not sure, Brenda. And number one, I'm so sorry to hear about the challenges that you're having in the recent diagnosis. But we can certainly look into that if you want to connect with Sydney afterwards. Sydney, did you already drop your email in the chat?
Not my email directly, but I can put it in there. And we also have like our outreach email, which I'll put in there as well. And they have a lot of resources to share too.
Yeah, and Brenda, we can look into that for you, and especially to connect with some of our partners as well.
Okay, I would really appreciate it. I could leave you my number or email, anything.
Yes, of course.
Thank you so much for taking the time to let me share.
Of course. Thank you, Brenda.
You're welcome. And thank you.
Yes. And I think, I don't know, Zella, if you wanted to, you were shaking your head, but I don't know if you wanted to say anything or add anything to that, but I just wanted to make sure.
So Brenda, our prayers are with you. It sounds like you have a double whammy. So you came in with a disaster issue, and now you have what is a debilitating disability. Work with your housing authority to contact the regional HUD office in your area. there are provisions within policy that will afford you an exception because of your crisis situation. And so that would be the best entity to work through this with.
Awesome. Thank you, Zolan.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was really awesome. I don't mean to speak out of turn, but thank you for sharing that. Please. Thank you.
No worries at all, Brenda. This is what it's all about.
Yeah, I was going to say that it truly, truly is. And honestly, that is why Tenant Talk Live was created. And, it was based on, we've had Tenant Talk, the publication, forever, but we wanted this conversation so people can connect, could share resources and everything. So thank you, Brenda and Zella, because as Sydney said, this is what it's about. It's about the connection.
Thanks, Renee. And we did have one question come in. I haven't finished reading it all the way, but we have Jennifer asking, what about reviewing strategies used in earlier times against other tyrants with too much power? Citing Jim Crow, strategies used to rid native reservations of government agents who ripped them off horribly and tried to destroy their way of life, and some of the other harsher times. And then just also commenting, like, some clearly want to turn the clock back, so it's on all of us to prevent that.
Thank you for that comment, Jennifer. So appreciate it. And some of the strategies worked back then. And so, it is important for us to understand history, and what pieces of that we can use now, for today, and what things we may need to, to change or to innovate on based on our current situation. Because I will say, going into with the incoming administration, it's not a normal situation, right? In terms of, we as a coalition, we work with Republicans, with Democrats, and that's just what we do. We praise when we need to praise, we compromise when we need to compromise, we challenge when we need to challenge. But I will say that it's not a normal situation in terms of the incoming administration. And so there are going to be times where we have to think differently and act differently to respond accordingly, to the challenges that are coming at us. And again, like I said before, they're going to be hot and heavy. It's going to be fast and quick, where we really are going to have to, where we have some of our partners doing some of the defensive work and others doing some of the planting that I talked about earlier. Because I think that's going to be a part of the strategy of the incoming administration, to throw so many foul balls our way that it will be almost impossible to hit them all. And that's where we're going to need numbers, and people, and organizations, connected in order to hit some of these balls that are going to be thrown at us. But I really do appreciate your comment, Jennifer, and it really is important to look at some of the strategies that were successful in the past.
Excuse me for breaking in. It's not my way to really speak. Thank you, Renee. I would like to say one thing I've noticed from working with different groups is that sometimes when things get hard and somebody's been at it, working on the good side too long, you get worn out, you get brain freeze, and you get an eye view of things that there has to be a way to break that. Like, look at all the different groups that have been targeted. We all have access to the internet now. That should help everybody. And another thing, I think most of us do know the larger picture of a lot of things, but the devil is always in the details. Okay, if a person is not aware of some of the details, it's good to make sure they become that way, and then that way, I think the focus remains on, look, it's not on any of these communities, any of them. It's about whoever is doing this. Because, while they really are doing these horrible things to this one community, there's no denying it. Look at what they're doing to these other guys as well. And they did this to this one. They did that to that one. How can it be everybody else's fault if it's, one, anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much. Anyway, very good to see you all again. Thanks for putting up with it.
Thank you for sharing, Jennifer. And those frustrations are really valid, especially for folks like yourself who have been doing this for a long time. I think it's also I can't remember when we talked about it, but just like acknowledging I can't remember what month it was. It was this year though. Somebody came and talked about like the importance of rest in this work. And even though like, you know, I'm not saying like full stop your advocacy at this point, but I think like gearing up for what we have coming up, it'll be important to do that when we can, when we have the privilege to do so. I don't know, Renee, if you were gonna add
Yeah, and Sydney, and thank you for that and raising that. And it might be something that we can do, as we talked about, if we need to increase the frequency of Tenant Talk Live, we will do that. But also too, you know, the resources and the speakers that we bring to you as well. Perhaps we can bring someone in who can help with and talk through, you know, rest and why it's important and how to do that and some strategies to do that as well. So I appreciate this conversation.
Thank you, Renee. So I see 2 hands up, and then there was another question that I saw in the chat. So we're nearing the end of the hour, so I'll say that those 3 are the last we'll take for right now. We'll see how quick we get through them, but if y'all have any questions after this, you'll have our emails too. So the one I saw in the chat, and again, Miss Jackson, if you want to ask it, now I don't know if it's the same one that you have your hand raised for,
It
but
is. It is.
yes,
I
awesome. Go ahead.
wanted suggestions for strategies for voter education, voter registration, especially since the statistics say that 30% Black folks didn't even get to the polls. And in Minnesota, we have another issue in that our ex-felons' rights have been restored, too many of which don't even know that, and organizing and mobilizing them, as well as helping people understand that when you're involved, too often people jump right to the top nationally, forgetting that it's those day-to-day things here locally that impact you first and foremost.
Renee, I don't know if you had anything that you wanted to add, but I can.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yes, thank you, Ms. Jackson, for that comment. You're right. And I think, you know, as we're looking at, because we have our campaign or an initiative called Our Homes, Our Votes, that we'll be looking at closely as well in the coming months. But I think it is important to think about, you know, the mobilization and how we're able to get more people out to the polls. But it's also, you know, part of, you know, thinking about some of the systems and the structures, because it's one thing to send people out to the polls, but yet another in terms of sending them out to a same broken system, right? And so it's really thinking through how to fix those things, because, you know, sending people out is great, but we also don't want them to be frustrated in the process and decide, well, I'm not doing this again. So there's a lot of nuances, and I think things that we have to think about as a coalition on how to do things, I think, differently with respect to voter education and mobilization, which are important. But how can we be a bit more effective in that realm?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Renee. And then we have one last question from Chandra, if you want to go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, so actually my question was kind of on the same lines. Like I try to like get as involved as I can, considering like I live in my van, but with committees and stuff in my local government, and keeping up with that stuff. But one thing is like it's really hard to get like clarity on a lot of the information that they provide to the public on like agenda meeting items and things like that. It's really tough to see like what's most effective, and like how, like sometimes when they're I don't always know how to go down that road, or like what the best road to go down is, like when it comes to advocating or speaking up for not just myself, like obviously, like I don't care if I'm homeless, like I'll keep working hard because I got nothing better to do. I live in my van. So like I just like want to be able to do it the right way though. So that can be really frustrating. So on that same lines, like I'd rather go to my local government first, but sometimes I feel like that's not enough and I don't know when to go down that road. So like, is there going to be more information on like what to do in those cases? Like, I don't always know my best course of action.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Chandra. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly. But just wanted to say thank you for your advocacy, you know, at the local and state level. It's critical to do that there first. I actually used to work before joining the coalition. I worked for local government here in the DC area. And that's where so many of the policies and things that really touch your and affect, you know, your life happen. So I do understand, you know, that it is important, you know, to be connected to what's happening at the local level, whether or not it's your city council, county council, whatever it is. But where are you? Where do you live, Chandra? Did I?
Madison, Wisconsin.
Wisconsin. Okay. It may be where we can connect you to one of our state partners in Madison, Wisconsin, who can also help you get connected to what's happening at the local and state level, because it is truly critical that you're connected there. I would really say first. Definitely, we need you in this fight at the federal level. But also we want to make sure that you're connected to the state and local, the things that are happening in your neighborhood. So if you want to share your, actually, I think Sid put in the chat earlier, the email address, outreach@nlihc.org. You can send a message there, and we can connect you with the folks in Madison.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Chandra, and thank you, Renee, for answering that question. We're quickly coming up at the end of the hour. I don't think we had any more questions related to like the conversation that we're having, but if there are any other ones that come up, friends, feel free again to email outreach@nlihc.org. And I'll write my email in the chat again as well if you want to follow up with me. But thank you again to Renee for joining us, and always sharing your wisdom and inspiration and words of encouragement. And thank you as well to Brooke, who had to step away early, and to Kayla for joining the call and also sharing some of their knowledge with us. This is our last Tenant Talk Live of 2024, so thank you to the folks who hung out with us this year. Our next one will be, I believe it's January 6th, which is the first Monday of the year. We're not going to have like a speaker per se, but that doesn't mean the call is not important, because we're going to be doing our community agreements for 2025. And if we're going to do this work collectively as a unit, we don't have to be in agreement all the time, but we do have to have community agreements so that we can do this work together moving forward. But yeah, we'll do that in January, and I'll drop the link to register for that. It won't show up right now, but I'll make sure to add it when I send out the recap email, so that it'll show up on your registration. And as always, we're always looking for blog post authors for NLIHCs on the Homefront blog on an ongoing basis. So, for example, Brenda, if you wanted to have a space where you wanted to publicly share your story, if you're comfortable doing that, we invite folks to share their stories. And again, you can email NLIHC at outreach@nlihc.org to share that story. And also, a lot of y'all were talking about things that impact the rights of tenants, and we are doing a campaign on the National Tenant Bill of Rights right now. So if you're interested in learning more about that or endorsing that Tenant Bill of Rights. I'll drop that in the chat as well. And Kayla is leading that work, so she can help answer a lot of those questions if you have any. And we also have our Facebook page if y'all want to stay in touch with each other outside of this. And that is all I have for you all. But as always, if you have any questions for me or if you have anything else that you would like to talk about, I will be here, and I dropped my email in the chat.
I have one more question, which is
Yeah.
really quick.
Yeah.
Where did you say I could tell my story?
If you email the same email that I've been sharing in the chat, just the outreach@nlihc.org, I'll be able to connect you with the team. It's our field team that helps lead that work.
I think y'all are awesome. I come every week.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Thank you,
appreciate
Brenda.
everybody. All right.
Well, we appreciate you. But thank you everybody again. Thank you to the speakers that joined us, and I hope you all have a lovely and restful holiday season, and we'll see you revamped in the new year. Bye everyone.